I think one of the stereotypes about women, which I've found to generally be true, is that our emotional intelligence is higher than men. And you need to use that as your superpower. In the case of my first two investments, they were based on a gut instinct and a really strong read of people. And understanding the leaders that you're investing in is a huge strength. So don't see that as a soft skill. I think that's a rock hard skill.
Welcome back to Graceful Investor. My name is Tasia, and today we have a friend of mine calling in, and she is going to share her experience around private investing. Her name is Arielle, and I cannot wait for you to meet her. Arielle, would you like to tell all of the women a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me, Tasia. And I wanted to first congratulate you because demystifying investing and finance for women is a passion of mine. I actually believe that I was put on this earth to show women, particularly women of color, that it's possible to be financially well, physically well, and emotionally well all at the same time.
Yes.
Usually we're one of those things and not the other, just given all of the demands. Speaking of demands, I am a mother of two. I have a 1 year old and a 3 year old, both girls. So that's my first job. And secondly, I'm a corporate consultant. I'm managing partner of a strategic advisory firm, leading a lot of our work around mergers and acquisitions and other financial moments for founders and CEOs. And I also, on the side, have had struck a decent amount of luck as an investor in early stage companies as well as venture capital firms. And my husband and I, as well, have other endeavors in the investing space. So I'm happy to share what little I know.
I love that. And when I first met you, I started speaking about investing and you just lit up. And I said, would you please come and share your experiences? So I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's kind of get into a little bit of the background around your investing. When was your first private investment? How old were you? Were you married at the time?
Yes. So I was, as I call myself, a baby boss when I made my first investment. I was a part of a group called Chief. It's a women's executive network across the US. And I just met this incredible woman named Heather Wabel, who had been running her own company. It was a workplace services company that provided a number of services from catering to fitness to health and wellness services for employers. And they had everyone from PayPal to the who's who as their customers, but I'd heard little about them. And she was
Mm.
seeking investment. And I just trusted my gut. Honestly, I just got to know her extremely well. And I just knew in my gut that she would be successful. And fast forward to today, the company has been acquired twice. The first acquisition happened less than a year after my investment, and then the second happened, I believe, late last year. And the current holding company, which I've stayed invested in, is a major workplace solutions company that has everyone from Jay-Z to Kevin Hart to the who's who as investors. And I never would have imagined that this small investment in a small business based in New Jersey would have led to a global institution. So
I know, and it's absolutely incredible. And I mean, you just light up when you speak about it. So, okay, so let's go back. So, how old were you when you engaged in that first investment?
I think I was 28 or 29, if I could remember. I'm 36 now.
So, I hear you saying you wanted to do it because you knew the person operating the business, saw how hard they worked, and you said, this is where I want to be aligned with. When you did that, did you already have a lot of your other financial picture kind of set up? Did you have a 401k? Did you have a brokerage account? Or was this really your very first thing you ever did?
So I am, and I don't want to take credit for this because I really want to give parents the due. I'm really fortunate that I have hardworking but really shrewd parents who have been investing on my behalf since I was born. And so when I turned, I believe it was 21, I learned for the first time that I had access to a decent amount of capital through Merrill Lynch that was being actively managed by their advisor. And in addition, I was very scrupulous about making sure I always contributed to my 401k in any job that I had. But of course, I've never tapped into that, but it's a nice safety net to have.
It is.
So I've always
Yeah.
had exposure to both the stock market and fixed income products through that relationship, although none of that capital has ever been touched, actually. So none of the capital that my parents have given me has ever been touched. It's just been folded into my family since I've gotten married. And my 401k remains untouched because, of course, there are large tax consequences of withdrawing early.
Yeah.
I only invested what I knew I was comfortable losing from my, checking account.
Yes. Okay. That is something that is a very good distinction to make for women who are thinking about doing this for the first time. It isn't a sure thing to invest in private companies directly. Could you talk about that a little bit more, and also the lockup phase that happens with an investment like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're investing directly in a company, you have to be on board. You have to be helpful. You have to be part of the company's success, I believe. And so, for example, one of the companies I'm invested in is currently searching for a rock star CFO. I am making introductions from my network because I want to make sure that goes well because my investment depends on it. As it relates to Heather, when she was thinking about her next moves from the company, I was one of the first people she called to get my opinion on the solicitation that she had received for the business. And I helped her think it through. And I was always checking in with her to see if she needed help. So I try to behave like an operating partner to ensure that when I do make a direct investment in a company, I'm part of the success. But you have to be incredibly patient because life is long, especially with companies, and you
Mm-hmm.
never know. So again, I could not have possibly conceived of those two acquisitions. I would never have imagined it would have happened. But I like to believe that a small part of that possibility is credit, at least in a tiny way, to how I helped serve as an advisor. When you're investing through a fund, um, I am invested as an LP in a venture capital firm.
And could you just pause and tell us, what does LP mean?
Ah, LP means limited partner. So there are general partners and limited partners. Limited partners provide capital, but also have, in the word limited, governance responsibility, governance ability, and they are not operators and they don't get to make decisions, but they certainly can be consulted, but that's not a requirement.
Okay, so the first opportunity you're speaking about, you did a direct investment with the company, with the founder. Now we're transitioning over to the other types of investing you've done, which is in a fund, and you are a limited partner in those situations.
Yes. And so when you decide to invest through a fund, you were just talking about timing.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, the rule of thumb is that private investment vehicles hang on to companies between 4 to 7 years. That's generally the private equity horizon. After that, they're usually actively looking for an exit. However, in venture, I will say because these companies are earlier stage, it could look longer than that. So just be prepared.
Yes, thank you. That is a really good distinction, and especially around the startup phase when they're being acquired by the fund, it takes a while to get things profitable and moving sometimes. Could you tell us when you first started looking at offering documents? So that's all the details that is presented to a potential investor, and it's kind of a term sheet. What kind of do you look for? What stands out? How do you feel reading those? I'd love to hear for women that might not have ever seen one before, just your advice and thoughts on how to read those.
So interestingly, when I invested in my first two companies, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and so I relied on a family member. My brother is an incredible lawyer, and so getting his gut check was really helpful. So always ask for help. Um, but I did take it upon myself to actually become a licensed stockbroker when I was at my last firm because it was a financial firm. So I happened to be able to be sponsored to take the Series 7 and SIE exams,
That is
which I
incredible.
think, thank you. I took the test 6 months pregnant with my second daughter
You,
and
you had
felt
shared that with
horrible the
me.
entire time.
I can only imagine, but what a testament to just your commitment to being curious and knowing that you wanted to master something more that would ultimately benefit your family, right? As you continue to invest. I love that you did that, and thank you for sharing that with the women today.
Yes. And by the way, even if you don't work at a financial firm, buy the books, read them. It's incredibly educational. It demystified a lot. And I do think that the financial industry is built to seem intimidating, particularly to women and other people who are underrepresented. We use all of these acronyms to make things sound extremely complicated. Listen, it's not brain surgery. You just need to get exposure. It's like gambling. It's literally like shooting craps. So if you know how to do that, you know how to invest.
One of the things that you and I had spoken about is investing groups and circles where pitches are made to more than just you at once. And I am curious what your thoughts are as a woman about how do you feel about asking questions during that presentation? You know, how do you feel walking into those types of pitches?
For those who um, worry about that, I just think you should always remember that everyone's faking it.
Yes. This is very accurate, actually. Keep going.
And I think there are a lot of ways for you to gain knowledge in your spare time. So, joining Chief, the group that I mentioned earlier, that women's executive network, gave me access and exposure to more people who understood this area. Um, you know, there are other groups. I decided to join a group called Tiger 21, which I find I learn a lot from those members. It's a group of investors, entrepreneurs, people who have a lot to share. So I've always been a joiner, if that makes sense, because I'm a forever student. And so I think taking that posture is really helpful. Additionally, if you're someone who is seeking access to those rooms and doesn't know how to get in, and maybe doesn't live where I live in New York. So there's endless opportunities.
Let's talk about that. So you are in a major US city.
Yes.
What about the middle America woman who is very curious about this space and wants to dip her toe into this? Where would she find investment opportunities?
Absolutely. So I think that if you are in a non-coastal city, a great untapped resource is your local chamber of commerce. There are tons of events and convenings hosted by local chambers of commerce. There are also directories for those chambers of commerce where you actually can see all of the businesses in your area. You might be
Mhm.
able to cross paths with people who are investing. So that's definitely a resource. Additionally, there are some organizations that are national.
That's very true. Yes.
And so something like Chief, like I mentioned previously, you had to be near a local hub where there was a physical space. You don't have to anymore. Um,
One of the other things that you and I had spoken about in terms of how to broaden your network is something that I think a lot of women might already be tapped into, which is working with and volunteering for nonprofits. A lot of the board members sometimes tend to be business owners who might be looking for investment.
yes, I would say volunteerism has added many dimensions to my life. I serve on 4 nonprofit boards and am chair of several committees. And that has introduced me to people from all walks of life that I never would have imagined meeting. And so it's really just about broadening your horizons and getting out there and forcing yourself to be exposed to people who maybe don't work at your day job or live in your home.
Yes. All right. One of the things that you shared with me, I would love for you to talk to the women about, which is what is an investing mission statement and why should you have one?
I love that you asked this question. Thank you. I believe honestly, everything in life needs a mission statement. So even when I think about my life, I have a mission statement, and that helps me determine how much of my time and energy should go to certain inbound things that come my way. I apply that across my life. My philanthropy has a mission statement. I am exclusively focused on racial justice, fighting anti Semitism, and supporting the arts where diversity is a focus. That's
Okay.
me. So when I get asks from nonprofits for donations, I have something on paper for my family foundation that I get to point people to.
Yes. And
Same thing with investing.
I will say that quite a few people have kind of your core values where you want to give, and does that nonprofit align with you in those areas? And I loved how you have flipped it over to the investing side as well.
Yeah. So the way that I can weed out whether an opportunity makes sense is my mission statement, which is generally supporting female and underserved founders. But I have a specific appetite for supporting businesses in the consumer space, simply because I think that that space is distressed and misunderstood.
Could you give an example of what that means? What does a company in the consumer space look like?
So one of my investments is Saysh, which is a sneaker company founded by the most decorated track and field Olympian of all time, Allyson Felix. And I bet on that purely because I was a huge Allyson fan. I've become very close with her brother, and I believed in what she was building. And what she's built is a sneaker that is custom fit for a woman's foot. And they also have other cool things that they do, such as most people don't know that your foot size changes when you have children sometimes. And so they have an unlimited free return policy for women who have given birth. So this is a company that hits all my boxes. It's consumer. It's also very focused on women. It's a female founder and a Black founder. Um, and shortly after I invested, they got a strategic partnership and investment from Gap Inc. And they're in Athleta stores nationwide. So that's another example of how I deem success. Even though I have not exited, there's probably a long road for the company to continue to grow. I believe that the sales metrics I'm seeing and the marketing partnerships and the updates I'm getting show that the business has potential. Um, so that's a perfect example of the fit.
Yes. So let's talk with the women a little bit about that. So by everything that you're reading and seeing, they are really growing, really hitting a lot of great milestones. That does not mean that you, as the private investor, though, get your money back with a return just yet. So, could you speak a little bit more about the threshold of patience as an investor and uh, just understand that concept? Because private investing really is so different from anything in the stock market or your 401k account.
So I should have mentioned this, but a big part of your investing mission statement actually has to include your familial and personal goals. So for me, liquidity and income are not a concern in my personal investing because my family has that taken care of in other ways.
So you're not doing cash flow investing. You're doing one time with a long time horizon type of
Correct.
investing. Okay.
So because I already know my risk tolerance, Saysh makes sense. This other workplace services provider makes sense. This VC investment, which could take up to 10 years, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're someone who's looking for steady income or has near term liquidity needs, I don't necessarily believe that these types of vehicles may make sense for you. And so that's the other part of the mission statement that you have to be careful about. Once you determine the mission statement, the thesis, as well as the family and personal goals, then that will lead you to what makes sense. First and foremost, have the right help and advisors, of course. And second of all, use those advisors to help you develop your mission statement. And you do not have to be wealthy to have an advisor. You can walk into your local bank and meet someone at the desk who can help you.
That is true. And I I really like how you're speaking about making decisions not in a vacuum isolated chamber, right? You are calling your family member who is an attorney. You're speaking with others about it. You mentioned earlier only invest in private investments what you're comfortable losing in case something goes horribly wrong with the company. Do you have an overall percentage in your mind of what percentage you're comfortable doing private investing with out of your investable assets?
Right now, I do not because I happen to be in a position to play, if that makes sense. However, I think based on the prior mission statement, that will help you come up with that allocation with an advisor. So, depending on your risk tolerance, that would determine your exposure. Same thing with what your needs are. income, liquidity, long term. So there's no straight answer when it comes to the private market. Back in the day, people used to always say, you want 60% exposure to stocks and 40% exposure to fixed income, and alternatives were basically only seen for wealthy people. Now it's a whole new world, especially as there are more and more funds investing in private companies than ever before.
Hmm. What are some of one of the things that people might not know is that there's minimum dollar amounts that need to be invested in deals. What are some of the minimum thresholds you've seen?
Interestingly, I don't know why this is the case, but I always get the answer of 25,000 as the
Hmm.
minimum. All three examples that I mentioned, I believe that was the minimum. And of course, that could be inaccurate in a few small cases.
Hmm.
But even recently, I invested in a quirky one that I can't talk about on the podcast, but it's in the arts sector, and even that minimum was 25,000. I don't know what it is about that number. I was just going to say I wonder if 25,000 for some reason feels substantial enough, but also digestible enough for someone who's starting out. I don't have an
Hmm.
answer, but that's been the general number.
The other thing that is very interesting about private investing is that there is a requirement, and that is that you have to be an accredited investor. Do you want to speak a little bit about what that is?
For most private investment vehicles, you have to be an accredited investor. There are
Hmm.
three ways to define accredited. Either your individual income has to meet a minimum threshold of 200,000 a year, or as a family 300,000 a year. As
Hmm.
well, another way to qualify is if you're a licensed broker. So say for example you have your Series 7 exam or some equivalent exam that's licensed by FINRA. And then the third criteria is if you have $1 million in assets.
Yes. Which, if, for a woman who has been a stay-at-home mom for quite some time, or who might be going through a divorce or widowhood and had a professional career, the net asset is sometimes the qualifier that they use in order to be able to invest in deals like these.
Exactly. Which is why I think education is key. So if you're someone who doesn't check some of these boxes, even just getting familiar with terms such as accredited investor will help you understand. Interestingly, I think those kinds of requirements also guide you and help you understand this is the type of person that can take that risk. There's a reason those three criteria exist. That's a red flag that says if you're willing to lose this capital, this is what your life should look like. So it's not these requirements don't exist for no reason. They're actually meant to protect
There's
investors.
definitely protective guardrails around private investing, and I appreciate that they're there. However, I wish there were more in the way some of the deals were structured. And you really have to know what questions to ask. And I just appreciate so much how enthusiastic you are about the topic, and your confidence and involvement, especially in the first company, really, really shines through. And it's very inspiring to hear.
Thank you. I'm so honored. And again, huge kudos to you for doing this for our community. Women need this.
If you have anything else that you'd like to give to encourage women who maybe have never done this before, but they're very intrigued, what advice would you give them? This can be about confidence, this can be about emotions, anything.
I think one of the stereotypes about women, which I've found to generally be true, is that our emotional intelligence is higher than men. And you need to use that as your superpower. In the case of my first two investments, they were based on a gut instinct and a really strong read of people. And understanding the leaders that you're investing in is a huge strength. So don't see that as a soft skill. I think that's a rock hard skill. And then combine that with education.
I love it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm curious if you have a lesson learned that you would like to share with women.
I think similar to the way women need to be careful about self care and protecting their time because we are often the most stretched in any family or community, we
Mm-hmm.
also have to do the same thing with our time and capital. So I can think of a company that I advised over a long period of time. And I really didn't agree with the founder's direction. And even after leaving advisory board meetings, our crew would sort of whisper on the side and basically say, she's not taking our advice. And I
Uh,
really wish I had pulled my money sooner. And thankfully, it was a de minimis amount and I was okay losing it, but if it had been greater, it would have hurt. Um, but needless to say, the company shut down, and that gut instinct actually
mm-hmm.
was not followed. I stayed involved, even though the feedback was not taken, even though the direction made no sense to me, even though all of these red flags took place. And that's where I think women, particularly many of us, are people pleasers, as I was,
Yeah.
can become victims. I felt guilty about deserting the project. I felt guilty about her being unhappy with me, and that led to a negative outcome.
That is a very, very wonderful lesson. I think we can apply it to a lot of areas of our life if we're involved in something that we start to have the spidey sense go off. And you're right, women do have very good intuition, which is a value add when you are looking at private investing. Is there any other final words you'd like to leave with our women?
Stay curious, stay nimble, be kind to yourself, practice self compassion, and find me on LinkedIn if you have any questions or need help.
Yes, this is Arielle Patrick, and please reach out to her and connect with her. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. This has been Tasia on Graceful Investor.